This is a video about how forced 50% matchmaking principle is keeping you down. Anytime you go on any kind of win streak, the system will contrive to make sure that you lose afterwards. Whether it does so via putting griefers on your team or by pairing you with noobs, the forced 50% win rate mechanisms are preventing you from climbing the ladder. You know when you used to frag everyone with a 70% win rate? But because of the forced 50% principle kicking in, no one is actually able to climb out of their MMR hell. And it has kept you in a lower league undeservedly completely. This is a video on why forced 50% matchmaking is actually ruining online gaming. If you agree with this diatribe against 50% win rate systems, and therefore skill-based matchmaking, then you probably enjoy maintaining a high win rate against players that are lower level than you. To many people, seeing a high win rate on someone is the mark of an impressive performance, as it makes them look skillful, a winning player. However, all skill is relative, and it is true that relative to low-level players, you may be skillful. People that actually understand how skill-based matchmaking works, to them, a high win rate is actually just indicative of a player that has not yet reached their real MMR, or it is a sign of a poorly functioning skill-based matchmaking system. And I'll explain exactly why that is the case in this video. Near the end of this video, I would like to tell you about this video's sponsor, EOMM.gg. It's a team that specializes in creating matchmaking systems especially crafted for the needs of each particular game. Whether you're a game developer looking to create a multiplayer experience for a small indie game or a bigger AAA project, you're going to love what EOMM.gg is able to bring to the table. Their most well-known work to people of this channel is being a part of the team that has set up the excellent W3 Champions ladder that has saved Warcraft 3 online play for me and for so many others. EOMM recently branched out to offer their services to interested game developers. More about that at the end. But let's continue with the video. Let's first define what a matchmaker is, what goals matchmakers are designed with, and what a matchmaker is not. Let's go back in time before matchmakers actually existed. Back when we used to play hot seat against our family or friends, behind our console or behind our PC, or when we went online and we had to actually share each other's IP addresses with one another with a targeted opponent. You would meet up in a chat room and you would share your IP address and you would set up some kind of peer-to-peer or server-based connection and you would just agree to start playing. This was a lot more laborious to arrange matches in this way. It was a slow and tedious process. Game developers then created automatic matchmakers to create a more seamless user experience, like Blizzard for instance with Battle.net. An automatic matchmaking system brings players together who press find game at roughly the same time and automatically matches them with one another. They will then play a game until one side is eliminated or leaves the game. This is the essence of what a matchmaking system does at its core. But who does it match together? Does it discriminate at all whom to match to whom? How does it decide? So the easiest and simplest way to matchmake people, for instance in a 1v1 game, would be for a system to simply have the first person that presses find game to be matched to the second person that presses find game, and the third person with the fourth, and so on and so forth. This is essentially a criterion-free way of matchmaking people, and it is by far the fastest way to matchmake anybody. And doing it in this way may actually be correct for certain games or certain game modes, like when there's a very, very small player base. This is for instance the case in the W3 Champions Reign of Chaos rule set that almost no one is ever searching for, but when someone is searching in that mode, you've got one person searching and the next one that presses find game will automatically be matched. There's no MMR sequencing there whatsoever. But at least you can find some games. A matchmaker can do much more though than the absolute fastest matching of players together. By adding extra criteria, matchmakers can sacrifice some measure of that speed for a measure of quality. This can greatly improve the experience for players in a game. You can match players based on geographical adjacency in order to obtain better and lower latency, as well as increasing the potential for maybe these players to socialize with one another before and after games in common chat rooms, since you most likely share a common language if you're surfing in the same geographical adjacency. And perhaps most importantly, a matchmaker can have a criterion of skill-based matching, and that is what this video is mostly going to be about. So let's talk about skill-based matchmaking. Skill-based matchmaking attempts to match people of a similar skill together in order to create even and fair matches. There's a lot of evidence that this creates the most enjoyable experience on average. In order to be able to do so, there needs to be a second system in place, which is called a rating system. A lot of people conflate the rating system with the matchmaker, but they're not actually the same thing. The skill-based matchmaker system uses the rating system to find out what people's level is, and it then matches them together if the level is similar. The game result that then happens does not initially matter to the matchmaker, but it does matter to the rating system, as it uses the game result to slightly adjust the MMR of both players involved. This updated MMR will then be used by the matchmaker in order to continue to use an accurate assessment on whom to match together. This rating of players is usually called either ELO, which is named after Arpad Elo, its inventor, or MMR, which stands for Matchmaking Rating. Winning any games increases your ELO rating or your MMR, and losing any games decreases your MMR. If you beat a higher level opponent with a higher MMR, you will gain more MMR points after a victory, and if you beat a lower MMR opponent, you will gain fewer points. Before we continue to explain more about what skill-based matchmaking is, let's talk about why it is. Why have skill-based matchmaking? If a new player in a game that has a player population of 1 million players repeatedly matches against the top 1 percentile players, they're not gonna have a very good time. And not only that, but they also completely lose out on the chance of organic learning at a digestible rate. In my experience, proper training and proper learning of new skills and just having fun in a game is most ideally obtained by matching with slightly lower, same level and slightly higher skilled opponents. I also find that the most enjoyable. What a skill-based matchmaking system really is trying to do is to create the most enjoyable and engaging player experience on average for as many players as possible. While some outliers may enjoy unbalanced matches for various reasons, such as farming a very high win rate when playing against lower level opponents, someone else is going to then be the victim of that and lose more than their fair share of games because they're matched against too high level opponents. In general, accurate skill-based matchmaking leads to a better user experience on average for the whole player base. I found this post on the Heroes of the Storm forums that show a little bit of misunderstanding about what's happening with your win rate. Please explain the 50% win rate to me. A post by Rage 4 years ago, May 2020. I'm just wondering about the win rate. People say it is forced 50-ish. Seems right to me. Almost everyone is right around this win rate, give or take 5%. So let's say I play my first 100 matches to qualify for ranked or whatever, and then I decide to play ranked. Somewhere in the equation for what league I'm put into is my win rate from quick match. I have won all of my placement matches and I lost all of them. I think he's talking about having 2 different accounts in Heroes of the Storm, going through the 100 matches that's required to go ranked. And on one of the accounts, he lost all of his games in placements, and in one of his accounts, he won all of the games in placements. So he's like, I've won all of them, I've lost all of them. It seems to roughly put me in the same place regardless of what happens. So let's say that's roughly silver 2. I can back this up, by the way. I, for research purposes, have multiple accounts in Heroes of the Storm as well. And it generally puts you in silver. This is true. So let's say I end up in silver 2. If the forced 50% win rate is a real thing, then how can I ever get out of that league? If I win 20 in a row and I move up a bunch, I will then start losing a bunch and end up right where I was. If this isn't how it works, someone please explain. I play with people all the time who I constantly outstat and I outplay them, but they are in way better leagues than I am. Not that I'm any good, just saying. I don't understand how I'm supposed to move out of my league. It just seems impossible. Every time I do, I seem to hit a real bad losing streak, even though I'm still keeping up with people, and I end up right back where I was. So that's a pretty compelling personal experience. And it seems to allege that if you win enough games because you're good enough to win more games, the system will contrive to make you lose games, which is what the opening paragraph of this video was all about. Actually, a developer for Heroes of the Storm replied to this post, and I found it a very illuminating answer that I think explains best what is actually going on. It mirrors my own thoughts and feelings on this, because essentially, forced 50 is both true and false at the same time. It is not Let's read the post and we'll understand more. So AZ Jackson replied and said this: I'm not an engineer, but I can take a crack at this. The forced 50% win rate discussion is weird and complicated because it's both true and not true at the same time. People often inject their own biases very heavily in games to support what they think is happening to them, usually to assign blame for a loss to an external source, in this case the matchmaker. Because it's an easy thing to do, the matchmaker can't defend itself after all. First, let's discuss what forced 50% is not. Forced 50 isn't the matchmaker putting potatoes on your team because you've had a win streak. Frankly, it's hard enough just to find good games that there's no way we would program such a thing, and there's no incentive for us to do so. We're incentivized to find matches of equally skilled players in our games because those are the most fun overall, which is what the matchmaker always tries to do. The way it tries to do this is by assigning a skill level to every player as they play our game, which is called MMR. This skill rating is based on whether or not you win or lose games and nothing else. It is up for debate. Someday we may find improvements in the future in how MMR is calculated, but there are many good reasons for this, and almost every game uses this kind of system to determine player skill. Alright, pause for a second. Heroes of the Storm did enter a alternative to purely win-loss based MMR and skill-based evaluation. It was called performance-based matchmaking. Aside from just the result of the game, which is influenced by all 10 players in this 5 versus 5 game, personal performance like damage stat, health stat, death stat, objective score stat, they were all being used to algorithmically determine who was the MVP and therefore most deserving of a cushioning of MMR loss when they lost, less MMR points lost even though they lost because they did so well, or a boost in MMR if you won. You did very well and you won and you did better than everyone else, so you're going to get more MMR for this win. I think in the end that doesn't matter. In the end, if you are a consistently skilled player, even if it gets you to your true MMR faster to be awarded for good performance, it will still get you to where you belong. On average, you are the only constant in your games and team games, so whether or not you get there faster or not doesn't really matter for what your MMR will actually be. However, this could be useful if performance-based matchmaking works well. It could be useful to have this so that you can get there a little faster rather than slower, as you will be awarded constantly for your good performance in winning and losing games. And getting to your true MMR faster is a good thing in general. You will have fairer matches more quickly. But let's go on reading this. I would recommend watching some informational videos on how MMR and ELO works if you're really interested in the nitty-gritty. So what the matchmaker does is it tries to find games where each team has as close of an average MMR as possible, while also having the MMR between each player to be in as small of a range as possible. Now imagine that everyone in the entire game has an MMR of 1, meaning that everyone has the same skill level. If we play in an infinite amount of games, then everyone will eventually have a win rate of 50%, since their skill is all the same. The 50% win rate of those players isn't the matchmaker punishing those who have win or loss streaks, it's just a natural consequence of the matchmaker working properly. In real life, it's not quite so cut and dry, since every player doesn't have the exact same MMR, but the fundamentals still hold true. As you win games, your MMR gets higher, which means that you will get into games with higher and higher skilled players until you hit your temporary skill ceiling, where you start to lose games because you are now the worst person in the game and you eventually end up bringing your team down. Conversely, if you lose lots of games, your MMR will go down until eventually you get into games where you're the best player on the team. The matchmaker getting you to a 50% win rate is not forced, right? It's a natural consequence of the matchmaker finding where you, over a long period of time, actually belong. Your MMR being an accurate reflection of your skill results in the natural consequence of you having a very close to 50% win rate. Keep in mind also that even 10 win streaks or 10 loss streaks are perfectly natural within the realm of statistics, even when the true chance of something is 50%. These win and loss streaks are often what people point towards as proof that something is broken, when it's simply not true. If you were to flip a coin 10,000 times, it wouldn't go heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails in perfect synchronicity each time. Instead, you will have some streaks. Over those 10,000 times, you would get some results half the time, but you will see streaks of getting heads or tails. This is also true for players who are at their appropriate MMR, but still get streaks. It's not that the matchmaker is broken, it's just how things are. Also keep in mind that people have good and bad days and sometimes decide to throw or try extra hard to win. These are behavioral changes on an individual game level, and they're really impossible to predict and account for by the algorithmic matchmaker. Which is why some games, even when they look like they should be evenly matched on paper, can still easily be blowouts. This is just scratching the surface of how these things work, but again, TLDR, the idea that the matchmaker forces you to win or lose after streaking is completely false. Having a 50% win rate over time does happen, and it is true that it's essentially the result of the matchmaker finding your proper place in the game over time. So I think this kind of sums up the myth busting of forced 50% very nicely, in that it is not conspiring to make you lose if you break away. Real skill gets recognized, and if you've improved enough to improve your league by a few divisions, you will re-obtain 50% win rate once you reach the higher MMR. And you'll momentarily have a higher than 50% win rate on your transition to the higher MMR. That is your journey. That is the reward of your journey, and that's the reward of getting better and momentarily winning. But eventually it finds people of your skill, and this is a good thing. On average, that's the most enjoyable experience. So forced 50 is both real and not real. It is not being forced, but it is a natural consequence of a well-working skill-based matchmaker. So forced 50 is kind of real, and it is a good thing, and it is not ruining online gaming, but making it the best it can be. Let's talk a little bit about the attenuations between speed and accuracy, because many online player bases have different challenges. I've played some multiplayer word games, like, think like multiplayer Scrabble or whatever, or multiplayer Ruzzle, that kind of thing, where I just get trashed over and over by expert players that seem to be winning all of their games. It is very possible that those developers just let loose the reins and just focused on speed of matchmaking over accuracy and skill-based proximity. Or they don't even have a rating system at all. They just match anybody that searches. In a system like that, the top 1% skill of the player base would probably obtain something like a 99% win rate, whereas a new player would lose almost everything, or someone not very good at word games, I guess. Only an average skilled player, in fact someone perfectly average, would win about 50% of the time. But it could often happen by blowouts one way or another, and not via balanced games. I don't think anyone would allege that those scenarios are more fun. Sure, some people want a 99% win rate, but by the same token, they could be the 1% win rate person as well, if everyone else is better. So many matchmaking systems use a waiting time actually to get a larger bucket of players. If a 2000 MMR player and a 1900 MMR player search for a game at the same time, they're a good compatible match. But if the system would wait just 10 seconds longer, it would see, hey, two new players have entered the queue, a 2100 MMR and an 1800 MMR player. Those two aren't as good of a match together with each other, but they would have been really good matches with the 2000 and the 1900 MMR player respectively. So by adding small waiting times and by having buckets of periods of waiting, rather than instantly matching well-matching MMR opponents, you could add an extra criterion to the matchmaker where it says, okay, anyone that searches game will have to wait for at least 5 seconds so that we can make more accurate matches potentially with that wait, in order to increase skill-based proximity satisfaction, even at the cost of a couple of seconds. The entire spectrum between speed and accuracy is possible playing ground for developers as they approach proper matchmaking for their game. A delicate balance with acceptable waiting times and speed of matchmaking, as well as the skill gap that could be between players. The more rules a matchmaker adds, the slower it gets. So that's the trade-off. Splitting the population into 4 servers to also better accommodate latency also makes matchmaking slower, but it can increase satisfaction about latency and social cohesion. Sometimes in MOBA games, people ask, what is a good win rate to have on a hero? And essentially, the question is a little bit meaningless. If you're a diamond player and your win rate on a hero is 40%, it simply means that you're probably a platinum player on that hero. But if you're a platinum player with a 60% win rate, you're probably just a diamond player on that hero. If you only play the hero that you have 60% win rate with, you'll eventually have 50% with them, but be in a higher league. But all your other heroes are 40%. So because you've been playing those, you've been dropping back down to platinum. So anyone that has an 80% win rate on a champion in League of Legends or a hero in Dota 2, it's not by itself impressive. A platinum player with an 80% win rate might be a low Masters player, which is impressive if you think Masters is impressive. But if you don't think Masters is impressive, then it isn't. But it has nothing to do with the number, but just the MMR that you have. 80% just means if you played that one more, you would go up in rank, which is probably something you should do if you want to be higher rank. But you may wonder, why can't I have over 50%? And the reason actually is because you are not the bottom or the top of the skill curve of a given game. This is a standard bell curve distribution for the player base and the skill rate that people have. Most of the people of the player base will be finding themselves somewhere in the middle. They're going to be at about 48 to 52% win rate, somewhere there. And when they experience a period of getting worse because they took a break or suddenly are on tilt, they'll fall below 50 for a bit. And if they have a period of learning where they've watched my stream, for instance, they're gonna go over 50% win rate and then find themselves a little higher in the skill base. The only way that you can have a lower than 50% win rate without pointing towards a broken matchmaker or a person that is still regressing would be if you're in this area right here. If you are the bottom 10 or 5 or 1% of an entire player base, aka the worst player anybody knows, you could be below 50% win rate, because even everybody else at your own small player base rank still beats you. You are the worst, so you could be 30% win rate, which, by the way, it's fine. There's many skills in life. Gaming is just one of them. You know, it doesn't measure your worth as a player if you're a bit of a newbie. That's fine. Likewise, the only way that you can enjoy a 56 to 80% win rate or whatever is if the system is unable to find enough equally skilled players at that higher rank in order to match with you. If a high-level player starts searching on the American servers at 4 a.m., the system cannot produce equal skilled players out of thin air. So it'll try to find a balance between letting him queue for 3 hours, which is too long, and he may quit the game if he can't find any games. But then it also has to match him with someone in order to make that match happen. It may have to match him with someone that's actually only got a 2% chance to win against him. And so he's going to have a really high win chance and a high win rate because it's pulling people from a little bit too low, but that's all it can do. So an adaptive system actually recognizes that the longer someone waits, the more it loosens the MMR band that is allowed to be the difference between one player and another. So keep in mind, high win rates are only relevant for the top of the ladder and for the bottom of the ladder. For everyone else, it's either a poor system, a poorly designed skill-based matchmaker, or someone that is still progressing towards their true MMR. Occasionally, people will talk about doing a big MMR reset. Resetting everyone's MMR is actually the perfect way to undo all the algorithmic learning that has been happening, to throw out all the history that you've been garnering as a system during the history of the multiplayer player base playing games. You throw out all the history of measuring a player's skill, and it will ruin the ladder for a couple of weeks. And then eventually everyone will get back to where they were if they stuck around long enough to actually keep playing this game without rage quitting, because match quality goes down so much. After an MMR reset, a top player will win 90+% of their games. They'll get bored and frustrated because it's so boring. Lower level players, doesn't even have to be the bottom, they will have 20-30% win rate, which is very discouraging because they were at 50% before the reset. Many people dream of the utopia, of the promised land, of an MMR reset. Just this grand reset that will, delete boosted player progress, that will remove smurfs, but those are going to come back as well. Right? If that is not being addressed on the on a level of reporting and punishing and so on, everything will go back to where it were. The only thing that happens is several weeks of poor matchmaking quality. So long as the reporting and punishment system doesn't improve and everyone is roughly at their own level, it's best just not to reset the MMR because it's just going to make poorer games. Some indie developers may sometimes be swayed to do an MMR reset after all, capitulating to the cries of the many that are asking for a big old reset that would finally get them to their true rank that they actually deserve. And then you get score lines like this one right here. Warcraft 3, which is made by small indie developer Blizzard, does a full MMR reset when a new season begins, so that when I start playing with my 4th best race out of 4, aka my worst, Undead, I can win most of my games just because it forgot every MMR rating that I had built up over previous seasons. This may be pretty fun for me, but it's not that fun for the opponents that I'm playing against. And then of course I could have better quality matches as well if it just remembered that I am one of the top players and it could immediately start putting me against the other top players. But I think eventually Blizzard will learn from this and stop doing MMR resets. And this video maybe will help a bit with that as well. Let's talk about 3 myths. I saw a couple of videos from shooting game genre, Call of Duty and so on, where big content creators are unironically talking about the fact that skill-based matchmaking is ruining online gaming. Initially, I couldn't believe my eyes, but I watched the videos anyway, and I did see a couple of returning themes coming out, such as skill-based matchmaking is forcing me to play meta. This is myth number 1, and my answer to that is, you don't have to play meta. Meta is what's generally believed to just be the best strategy, right? Every mastery of different skills, including playing the best strategy, together comprises your total skill. So if you get faster, your MMR goes up. If you play smarter, if you play less emotional, if you don't get tilted, if you cooperate better with your teammates, all of these raise your MMR and you will go up in skill. And that's why your MMR goes up. Playing good strategies, which is playing the meta, is part of that, but you don't have to do it. You could play off meta, lose a little bit more, you'll be slightly lower MMR because your other core skills are still where they are, and you'll get to 50% win rate again at a slightly lower MMR and therefore a slightly lower league level. You used to be Diamond 1 at the top, now you're Diamond 4, which is lower, or however they do the numbers in your game, right? And you can be happy with that. At least you'll be playing in a way you like. You could be a little bit higher, but apparently you don't want to play the same broken hero or class all the time, and that's fine. It does mean technically when your teammates say, "Hey, your hero choice is making us lose," they might be right actually, because you are better than them, which you could let them know. You can say, yes, it's true. It's true. My hero pick is making us lose. I have made a decision to start playing in a way that I like. I used to be cookie cutter and I was higher level than you. I am better than you. It's true. I could have won us this game. It's true. But I don't want to play the same broken heroes over and over. And I have more fun this way. So allow me my weakness of not playing strategy, just as I allow you your weakness of poor aim, poor emotional self-control, flaming allies, not using allies as a resource, and so on. And as long as we don't talk about each other's weaknesses, we can continue to play at the same MMR, which is what we're doing here, right? We all have our own weaknesses, and I'm not pointing out yours. And I think then they'll get it, right? And you can get along and get cracking with the rest of the game. But I see this sometimes, right? People say, oh, I play Teemo in League of Legends, and people don't get it. They report me and they talk about me all the time, right? But you're playing at the same MMR, right? Why are they talking about your Teemo? They suck in different ways. I've never understood this part about flaming allies at the same MMR. You're all sucky or good in a different way, right? That's why it equals out. It's because the system is working. So it doesn't matter when someone plays off meta on average. So that's myth number 1, dispelled, busted. Myth number 2, skill-based matchmaking in principle is fine, but it's the way in which it does it that's broken. The game is putting griefers on my team every time after I've had a win streak, just to bring me back in line. My answer to that is you're most likely noticing griefers more frequently when they're on your team than when they're on the enemy team. You were fine with it when you won 8 in a row. You didn't notice it or you didn't mind. It's kind of human nature and human psychology, right? The second part is griefers are more likely to break your win streak. If you are playing well, you learned, you're having a good day, you're in a good mood, etc., you are most likely going to be stopped in your momentum by a griefer whenever it happens. As a 4 versus 6 is hard to win. But they weren't put there on purpose for some nefarious reason by the algorithmic matchmaker. They were just there. They suck. Sometimes humans suck, right? You're playing a team game, so you don't have the full control. And sometimes there's a griefer, and then, it makes you lose the game. The system would have trouble predicting when someone is going to decide to play poorly. Myth number 3. Skill-based matchmaking is the goal, but EOMM, which is engagement optimization matchmaking, is being slipped in sneakily. This is actually possible. Engagement optimization matchmaking is a complicated criterion-based system that slows down matchmaking, or it can sometimes at times speed it up, but it reduces player enjoyment in general. At least I greatly believe so. I don't think it's likely to be used a lot, but because it is possible that you can come up with some reasons why developers might think it's a good idea, it has probably happened sometimes. So I'm not going to dispel this myth entirely. In my opinion, SBmm, scale-based matchmaking, literally is engagement-based matchmaking, because this is the most enjoyable, therefore you have the most player retention, therefore it is engagement optimization. And I think developers that try EOMM systems, engagement matchmaking, are misguided, as they will find out. In fact, there was a quote here from Activision that said, "Our data shows that when lower skilled players are consistently on the losing end, they are likely to quit matches in progress or to stop playing altogether." This just came out 5 months ago. This is a post from 5-6 months ago. "Our data shows that when lower skill players are consistently on the losing end, they are likely to quit matches in progress or to stop playing altogether. This has an effect on the player pool. A smaller player pool means wait times for matches increase, and connections may not be as strong as they should be. This can compound over time to create a spiral effect. Eventually, when only high-skilled players remain, because lower-skilled players have quit out of frustration, the result is an ecosystem that's worse overall for everyone." Exactly. EOMM is stupid, SBMM is EOMM. Besides merely adhering to MMR ratings that are very pure and real, there are other ways to increase player satisfaction with ranking and matchmaking systems a little bit. Generally, when you play on a ranked ladder, online competitive multiplayer, your MMR number doesn't change all that much. After your period of most growth, MMR is a relatively static number and therefore is not very fun to look at. Humans like to feel like they are progressing towards something. Of course, just enjoying the game that you play against evenly skilled opponents for many people is enough, but it is possible to add a little bit of extra fluff and satisfaction on top of that in order to both stimulate ladder activity and increase player enjoyment a little bit. Allow me to explain how. Aside from just the number of your MMR rating, it can be fun to be awarded titles for your MMR rating. MMR stands for matchmaking rating, so I just said, oh my god, I just said matchmaking rating. I'm so stupid! So anyway, for your ratings such as Bronze, Diamond and Masters, as well as being recognized for the amount of games you've played via skin or title unlocks, or by having a ranking system that awards some level of points for activity. So you can add progression-based rewards in terms of rank placement, but not in terms of MMR placement, to reward activity within a given season. This can take the following forms. So what is a progression-based reward system, right? It just means as you play more games on the ladder, that is being recognized. Not whether you won, not whether you lost, just playing games. There can be some kind of accumulative number or rank point system that gives you something extra, but it is not being used to place you against opponents. That just uses the MMR rating. This is just fluff, aesthetic fluff on top. So there was the StarCraft 2 system of bonus pool. Essentially what bonus pool was, when you win a game, you win extra points. But only a limited amount of bonus pool is available. And when you lost a game, you lost fewer points. It would draw points out of the bonus pool. If you played enough games, like quite a lot, your bonus pool would hit to 0 and you would no longer have any benefit from that. This bonus pool added extra points on top of your MMR, and that comprised your rank. This did mean that there is some kind of rank point inflation, it did also mean that even if your skill remains completely static and flatlined, you will slightly keep going up in league. And there are some downsides to that, but there's also the upside that recognizes you for trying. Just like parents should teach kids and teachers should teach kids, it's, you know, it's very valuable to try. You know, at least you tried, A for effort. Same thing here. And it's not something to mock either. Like, the time you put in could be recognized by a system, and the bonus pool StarCraft 2 system did this. The negative inverted system of Warcraft 3 BattleNet in 2003 essentially worked with the same principle, but just displayed it differently. Back then it was called experience decay. Rank points were called experience points, and leagues were instead done by level. You would start at level 1, you could get to level 50 and then beyond, right? And high level players were level 50 plus, and medium skilled players were level 30 and 40. So XP decay is essentially the same thing. It punished you for not playing for a week. If you didn't play a single game for a period of 7 days, your rank would start decaying. Your XP would start decaying. It's essentially the same thing as a bonus pool, but from the negative inverted part. Bonus pool is a cleverer system because humans generally prefer getting gifts than being punished for not playing, but they come down to the same thing. Even the W3 champion system uses a rank point system for Warcraft 3 now, and it's also the same thing. You have a certain amount of points unlockable in a season, and why this is a good thing is because people feel like they're progressing towards something, and it activates the ladder. In a new season, a rank 1 player, like in terms of MMR, would have to play only 1 or 3 games, and it would instantly be rank 1. Why? Because their MMR that would rank you in a purely MMR-based system would immediately recognize that your MMR was the same as last season and you just won 1, 2, or 3 games. So now you're active in the new season, boom, you're rank 1, and you could essentially take a 3-month vacation to Hawaii and you'll still be rank 1 when you come back because you're just that good, right? So an activity-based system helps to stimulate a ladder and makes a new season an exciting experience because everyone is, you know, required to play at least 150 games to unlock the entire reserve pool of bonus points that you could unlock. And this is a good thing because, you know, active player base makes for better matchmaking. And people feel incentivized to play and have fun with their favorite game. So, good system. There are a couple of extra challenges in team-based matchmaking systems that aren't as active in one-on-one. It is definitely more challenging in general, because in a team-based matchmaking, it has to match 10 different players at the same time in a 5 versus 5. Here's a small problem that can happen in the event of a team-based matchmaking job. Let's say you've got a Grandmaster player that is searching for a team. He gets match made, and the average MMR of players on both sides is actually equal. But we've got a Grandmaster player and he's grouped with 4 Diamond players, and he's against a team with 5 Low Masters players. This is a fair matchup, and algorithmically the system predicts that there's going to be a 50-50 win rate. If all players are psychologically neutral and just do their best, it's a coin flip who's going to win. So this is an excellent job of matchmaking by a system. But there are a couple of biases that can develop, and there are a couple of opinions that can be legitimately had by all the players in this game, such as Grandmaster may think, all my teammates are quite noob, and he's kind of right. The 4 Diamond players are mostly focused on the negative aspect of the 5 enemy players all being individually more skillful than they themselves. They may not have as many eyes on their teammate that is supposed to carry them because they're just getting shit on in lane or at the bomb point A, location A in Counter-Strike, right? They're just noticing the opponents are better than us, and that feels bad to them. And he feels bad because the teammates are noob. Whereas the Team 2 may actually not have as much concern about the fact that they are shitting on the 4 players that are in Diamond. They're just seeing one extremely skilled guy that is owning everybody, and they're like, oh, that guy's probably a smurf, or that guy is way too good to be in this lobby. So it is fair, but there's a rather large skill discrepancy. This is a legitimate challenge in a team-based game, and this can happen quite a lot. And some people look at situations like this and say, the matchmaker's broken. But my question is, what else are they supposed to do? That Grandmaster player has no recourse. He cannot a search game and then be presented with 9 other Grandmaster players. So some people say, oh, the Grandmaster player is being punished for being so good. They keep giving him noobs in order to make him lose. No, he's not being punished, right? That is just what actually creates 50% win rate matches. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't possible that a matchmaker could be slightly misattenuated, that perhaps it overshot a bit. It found 4 players that are a little weaker, or perhaps the game design is actually more forgiving to 5 cooperative players that are at the same level. It's actually more conducive to having them win. But algorithmically, the system could learn that team 2 wins too often, and it's actually going to adjust things a little bit and make sure that one of those Masters players is on this side and one of these Diamond players is on that side. That's something a system could learn from, and it's going to come down to the programming and algorithmic talent of the people that have developed the system. Overall, there are no real ways around that, as it's just kind of lonely at the top, be it a team game or a one-on-one game. One sobering note before we start rounding out this video: there are of course smurfs, griefers, trolls, disconnectors, leavers, cheaters. There are many challenges, and all of these require a continuous helping hand and a watchful eye, which means developers need to spend manpower, resources and time to maintain the health and the state of their multiplayer player base. Most of these problems are human problems, however, and they require education, a reporting and a punishment system, rather than changes to the matchmaker, which is what so many players are, in my opinion, misguidedly asking for. Matchmakers can work perfectly, and you can still have bad games despite of it, because of throwers, so those need to be dealt with for the health of people's sanity and for the health of the game. All in all, it can be incredibly complicated to not only create a fair matchmaker that correctly balances the needs of fast matchmaking as well as accurate skill pairing, but also deal with all the potential micro problems that can happen and get lost in the sauce. And now a word from this video's sponsor. If you've made it this far, then you are passionate about matchmaking and you may want to learn more about EOMM.gg. EOMM.gg is a team that understands all of these challenges very well. When Warcraft Reforged launched without a ranked ladder to deserved negative reviews, a new third-party ranked service was set up, which is called W3 Champions. W3 Champions is a third-party app that sets up games between players in the same way an official ladder does, but it's built entirely by people of the community. EOMM.gg is a company comprised of a part of that W3 Champions team. It sprang forth from the experience garnered in maintaining W3 Champions, and they're now offering their experience in handling the challenges of creating a satisfying matchmaking experience for an online player base of a game to interested game developers to get matchmaking done right. For too many game developers, figuring out proper matchmaking is an afterthought after launching an amazing game, tacked on after a year or two. Age of Empires 4 and Warcraft Reforged released with hidden skill-based matchmaking, but without a visible ranked system. Matchmaking and ranked systems are not just an afterthought of a successful game that cost years and millions of dollars to make and produce. They're an integral part of the entire experience that you need to hit the ground running with. Involving an experienced team of matchmaking and ranked system builders as early as possible is instrumental to creating a successful online game experience. The initial influx of players is the one golden opportunity to make players stick. With a good matchmaker, you'll have more and more satisfied players, and everyone is having a better time, which means a healthier player base. EOMM provides that experience right away, as their algorithms are able to learn from games data from day one, as they have the proper experience and tools to do so. Involve them early in your project now by contacting them via the link in the description. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, maybe learned something, and I hope to look forward to reading your comments about why I'm wrong and Forced 50 is actually ruining your online gaming. Thanks for watching. See you next time here on Grubby Talks.